Hi guys, Samantha from GSMO Tutorials here, and today we're going to be making a cute trinket dish. So we're going to be using souffle today, and this is the main colour we're going to be using, and it is, let's see, souffle mocha, I believe is what it's called. And you're going to take that, this is about 3/4 of a 2-ounce block. And then I'm just going to take some white scraps. I'm not quite sure how much I have here, but it's just some white scraps that I've had lying around. And I'm going to pop that onto my sheet. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a marble. So let me just pop those on at random. Use your roller to just squish that in properly. And there's no particular method to this, it's very loose. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop that up like so, in no particular method, just chop that up, grab that off your tile, like so. There we are. Bunch it all together. Give it a little squish on either end so you've got all bunched together. Squeeze it. And I'm just getting it all into one nice big chunk of clay. And then I'm going to start rolling it. And just before you start twisting, just make sure it's all stuck together, because the last thing you want is it to start coming apart when you actually start twisting. So now you're just going to twist like so, roll, twist, like so. And again, there's no particular method to this. It's very loose. You don't have to stress too much when doing this. Okay. And notice when I'm rolling, I'm not rolling in this direction, I'm rolling in this direction. Just zoom it out quickly. There we go. So just watch, I'm going to roll and I'm going to roll inwards. And what that does is it keeps the clay from expanding too far while I'm twisting it. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think I need the stripes to be any smaller than that. So then what I'm going to do is I'm then going to take that and I'm going to roll it in on itself like so, because I don't want them all to be going in the same direction. Then I'm going to roll it out with my roller, and this little tail end, make sure to tuck that in because we won't be able to use this whole thing. Okay. And then before you thin it out too much, take that and just press it into a rough rectangle shape, or whatever shape your bowl's going to be. If you're using a circle for the shape of your bowl, then you don't have to worry about doing this bit, but mine's going to be a square, so I'm popping it into a rectangle, and then when I roll it's going to stretch it out into a more square-like shape. Okay. And there we go, that's a marble that I am pretty happy with. I'm just going to take this and squish that in, make sure we have it all stuck together. Then I am going to roll this through my pasta machine on my third thickest setting so that it's all nice and even. And here is how it's come out. So you can see there how nicely it's turned out. So choose the side that you like the best. Personally, I like this side best because it's more blended, but that's a personal preference. So we're going to pop that down and just smooth that onto your tile. You can even burnish it on if you want. I just want it to be stuck down. I'm using a glazed ceramic tile to work on. Then we're going to be using a leaf stencil. I'm going with a floral theme today, but you can choose whichever pattern you want. I'm going to take that, and I'm also going to smooth that down onto the clay quite firmly. This is quite an important step. You can then use your roller to smooth that down even further so that it is stuck. That's exactly what you want. Okay, then I'm going to bring over our next colour, and this is also souffle. Let me see, this is ivory. Now it's important that this is very soft. It needs to be like really soft, to the point where you wouldn't really be able to work with it when sculpting or caning or anything like that, because it's too soft. And the way I achieve that is I actually use a Kato conditioning bar. This is really helpful to get your clay nice and soft. So I highly recommend doing that and mixing about 1 part of the conditioning bar to your colour. Okay, and then all you're going to do is you're going to smooth that through the stencil, like so. And this is why I was saying that it's very important that the clay be nice and soft, and also that the stencil be smooth or pressed down onto the clay firmly, because if it's not, it's going to be lifting up while you're doing this. Continue doing that for however much clay you need to. This is the cutter that I'm going to be using for the shape of my bowl, so I'm going to be using that as a guide to see how much I need to be smoothing through the stencil. For you it might be a different shape, so just use whichever shape you're planning on using. Okay, then when you're done, grab a piece of paper, and I want you to burnish your piece thoroughly. You can even use your roller to do that by going over it like so, because we want to make sure that ivory clay has been stuck down firmly into the clay underneath the stencil. And this is quite important because when we lift the stencil up, we want it to separate. We want the stencil to come up cleanly, and the clay that is on the stencil to separate from the clay that's stuck to the clay underneath. Sorry, to verify that. Lift that up, and I might just even roll over to give it the best shot. It's got to be nice and clean when I do this. Okay, let's lift it up. And that's coming away pretty well. Came away very well. You can see there that there's clay. What I will typically do then is I'll take a blunt blade and I'll go over the surface and scrape it. I'll see about showing you that when we're done here. But yeah, that is how it should look. Then you want to grab another piece of paper, place that over the surface, and burnish it down until it's completely smooth. Okay, and that should just about do it. Lift that up. You can see that we have a really beautiful looking piece. Just bring that over. That's how it's going to look. Now it's looking quite nice at the moment, but I want to do one last thing, and that's going to be to bring over this palm stencil. I'm going to place that over the surface, and again, just like before, smooth that down. You can use your roller to gently get it to stick, because again, we need that to stick nicely. Okay, and that should do. Okay, and just so you can see what I'm doing, because this is a fairly large sheet of clay, let me move that out of the way. I'm going to be using some acrylic black paint. Pop a little down over there. Then I'm going to just use a makeup sponge, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear that so that we get a really uneven edge here. Grab some of the paint, we do not need a lot. Just tap that down. And then just tap that over the surface like so. We do not want a lot of paint on here. We're looking for a very light cover of paint, like so. Okay, and just do that across the entirety of the stencil. Okay, then lift that up, and there we go. That will have left a very nice, light, soft pattern. And so the last step before we move on to actually cutting this out is to burnish this. You can leave the texture raised if you want to, but I personally don't want to do that. So just grab your paper again and give this a burnish. And then we are going to prepare the backing. Now the backing I'm going to do is going to be some black souffle colour. It can be any colour you want. You don't even have to put a backing on if you don't want to, but this is going to be a little thin if I don't put a backing on. So just saying, get ready for the backing. Okay, there we go. Right, then I want you to loosely trim around the edge. Don't trim too close to the pattern. And the reason I'm doing this is because we're going to be lifting up this piece of clay, but because it's quite big, it's just going to be easier to lift it up if we get rid of some of this excess clay off to the sides, and you can see that it's stuck down to the tile very well. So we're going to need a blade to lift this up. Do not cut before you lift it up, because you will end up distorting it massively, the shape anyway, when you lift it up. Okay. And I'm not using a super sharp blade when I do this for two reasons. One, because my fingers are they're up and in it, so there's a possibility that I might nick the blade against my fingers, so it's good to use a blunt blade. Also, your clay might get sliced through if you use a sharp blade, so I highly recommend using a relatively blunt one. It just you'll end up with less issues. And you can see there, that looks really quite nice. I love how that turned out. I'm going to put this to the side because we're not going to cut that out just yet, and we're going to prepare the backing. Now before we prepare the backing, I just want to bring over the stencil, because a lot of you have asked in the past, how do I clean it? Just take your blade, again a blunt one, and just scrape it over the surface, and you'll be able to get the clay off. Now it might take a little bit of time because there's quite a bit, but you can see it's a pretty easy process and it works quite well. Okay, and here is the clay that we're going to be using. And for texture, I want to be using a roller. Now I'm going to have to trim this down to accommodate the roller, just because it's not quite wide enough. There we go. Let's see, does that work? Yes, it does. Okay. I'm just going to stick down the end here. And I'm going to stand up to do this. I highly recommend doing that. And just roll across the surface. And just don't let it get stuck in the roller too much. Okay, there we go. You can see there how it looks. Then I am going to stretch this because it won't fit otherwise, and so I'm using nice soft clay to be able to do this. Okay, and let's see if that will accommodate it. I can just check. Yes, it will. Alright. Okay, so I've popped our veneer face down onto a piece of paper. Bring over your black clay and lay that down, and don't press too hard because obviously you're not going to be making the entire bowl this big, so you want to be able to separate that black from your base clay when you get to it. Okay. And one last thing, just so that it doesn't have too much of a shiny finish, I'm just going to take the sponge and lightly touch down on the surface. I'm not flattening out the texture, but I am giving it a light sandy texture, and it also makes sure that it's relatively well bonded to our base clay. Okay, bring over your piece, and actually I want to cut it this way so that I make sure that I get it in the middle. Okay, so just fuss with that until you're happy with the position, and I'm pretty happy with that. And then press down. And spin and rotate while you're doing that, because you're not going to be able to get it all in one cut because it's a pretty large piece. Okay, lift up, remove your excess clay, and then our last step before baking is going to be to go around the edges with some more acrylic paint, just so that it ties it off. So grab a little bit, you don't want a lot. And just tap around the edges, like so. And you can do as much or as little as you want. You can even skip this step if you want to. You don't have to necessarily do this, but I think it looks quite nice. And it ties it off because you can see that the stencil I used was a little too small for the bowl. And so this is a nice way to hide that seam. Okay, and there we go, that's how it looks. And here is how the back looks. So now I'm going to bring over our bowl that we are going to be using as a base. I'm using a nice large one today. And just make sure to position that in the middle, and that's going to be a nice shallow bowl. I might see if I have a different one, but I think this is going to be end up being the bowl that I bake in today. Okay, so this is going to end up being the bowl that I bake in. So I go pop this into the oven for a full hour at pretty much recommended temperature. Quick thing I want to point out is, especially when you're using some kind of ceramic or even glass bowl as a base, make sure you heat the clay up from a cold. Make sure you put it into a cold oven and then heat it up, because if you put this straight into a hot oven, a fair number of the time your base is going to get heat shock and it might even crack on you. So I highly recommend starting with a cold oven and heating up. So I put that into the oven for a full hour, and then when we're done we can attach the feet. Okay, and here it is out of the oven. So it's got a nice faint slope to it, but I quite like it how it's turned out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to quickly cover the sides with some black acrylic paint. So I'll just grab some of that. Just use your sponge from earlier. Tap a little bit down, and then just tap that along the sides, just so you have a nice, easy, consistent finish. Because you can see some of the underlying clay, and this will just tidy it up. Nice thing about the paint as well is that you do not have to seal it if you're going to bake it. If you don't bake it, you do have to seal it. But I just thought I'd mention that. Okay. So just continue finishing off the edges, and then when we're done with that, we are going to make our base. Okay, and the base is going to be really simple. Just grab some souffle black and roll that into a cylinder like so, and try to keep the cylinder consistent the whole way around. Then take those two ends and then just work those together so that you create a joined piece. And this part is going to look inconsistent to start with. We can fix that, don't worry about that too much. Just smooth out that seam until you can't see the join line anymore. That's quite important. Then just squish that a little bit and even it out so that it looks about the same thickness as the rest of it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to bring over our stencil from earlier. And here it is. I'm going to place that down, keeping that nice and circular. Grab our bowl, and then I'm going to position it so that it's in the middle. And actually it's going to be easier to put it on the bowl first like this and check that it's in the right place. Then take the stencil, place that down, and very gently flip that like so. Then I want you to take that and press down, and that's going to secure it to the bowl, and it will also imprint the stencil's texture into our base. Lift that up, check that you've got a decent imprint, and we do. It's also nice and flat, and it will just even out the whole thing, giving it a nice clean finish with relative ease. Peel back your stencil, and you can see there it's got a very light texture to it. I'm probably going to bring over my texture sponge quickly, and I'll just lightly tap the surface so that it has a texture. Also do that along the edges, just gently, don't have to be too aggressive with it, and that's just going to speckle it and give it a matte finish when we're done. Okay, then we are going to place that onto a piece of plain printing paper and bake it like so. Okay, and here it is out of the oven. You can see there how the back looks. So it turned out really well. I'm quite happy with how it looks. Sides look all nice and finished. It's got a nice organic edge to it. Yeah, very happy with how it turned out. Keep in mind that you can of course use different colours. You do not have to use the ones that I'm using. This one's actually being made as a gift for someone in my house, so it had to match their bedroom. And so that's why I went with these colours. So if you wanted to go something maybe a little bit more on the green tint, you can do that. You could of course use different stencils and therefore have a different theme going. Maybe something like forest theme would look, something like an ocean theme would look quite nice. So just keep that in mind when you're working with this. And if you enjoyed the tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below, as I enjoy reading every single one of them. I don't necessarily respond to all of them, but every single one does get read. So please do leave a comment if you have any questions or would like to comment on the project or future projects that you would like to if you would like to see future projects. Also, please subscribe and leave a like, as it's free and it really helps the channel out, and I greatly appreciate that. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.